I'm David Smith. 13 years ago, I founded and still run the Affordable Housing Institute, which is a global nonprofit based here in Boston that works around the world on pro-poor housing and urban development interventions. We are in the solutions business. Housing is a product. It's a physical good. People own houses or build houses. We think of housing in terms of what's manufactured. But housing is something also that people buy or they rent in. And if they rent in it, someone has to build it and develop it. So in addition to the physical part of housing, there's a financial part of housing. Every time a house is built, somebody found all the money to build it. And most of the time, that's done by borrowing. Because a house is so expensive, you can't pay for it out of a month's wages or even a year's wages. And so in many parts of the world, the challenge in housing affordability and the challenge, in fact, in housing supply is how we get financing, either to develop it or to buy it or to renovate it. And so the question arises, why isn't there enough financing for this housing? We see people living in poverty, paying rent to somebody, but they can't get a loan that might cost them less than they're paying in rent to the person who's being a slum landlord. And the answer is that finance essentially involves an element of trust. I'm going to give you money, and you're going to go away and do something with this, and then I'm going to sit here for the next 6 months, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and hope you pay me back bit by bit by bit. So in the developed world, in Boston, where I'm talking about this, if I want to borrow money to buy a house, the first thing they will ask me is, show me your credit score. Many of these places in the world, they don't have credit scores. Why don't they have credit scores? In part because in many places in the world, I don't have a formal job. I sell cigarettes on the street corner. I make tortillas. I weave in my house. Often I'm a woman. I do some kind of home-based labor, and I sell what I make for piecework, for cash. So I don't have a pay stub. So how do you know what my income is? Okay, so the second thing that happens if I want to buy a house in the developed world is someone says, what is that house worth? Do you own that house? Well, it turns out, no, I don't own that house because it's informal. Maybe it's on land that was zoned agricultural, and now the city's grown up around it. Maybe it's a house I built myself. Maybe it's a house that started out as something smaller, and I added to it over time. So I can't show you a piece of paper that says you have a title deed to this house. And mortgage finance, as it's used in developed nations, is predicated on the idea that in addition to me promising to pay the money back, if I don't pay it back, you have a piece of paper that lets you go into court and get a judge to say, you're going to take that house and kick me out of it. Now, how would you make a loan to somebody who came to see you and said, I haven't got a payroll slip, I don't file an income tax return, I don't have a title deed to my house, and if you foreclosed on it, you probably couldn't resell it, and you might not be able to foreclose on it anyway. If you're a lender, you might say, gosh, I don't want to make that loan. The poor person says, well, what am I supposed to do about that? I want to buy this house. The lender says, that's not my problem. And so what we have with respect to financing is we have a problem of information, i.e., you don't know me as a borrower. We have a problem of credit. You can't verify that I can pay it back. And we have a problem of collateral. You don't know that the house has some value. You don't know that I will protect it. Some of you will have heard of microfinance, which is a form of lending to people for very small amounts of money for income generation activities. So microfinance is really little bitty in time and in dollar amount. Mortgage finance is really big and depends on all of that stuff I just said. And in between is a missing space that some people call housing microfinance, we call home asset loan finance, that blends collateralized lending with microfinance principles. And we do know how to do it. We're pioneering it along with other people around the world. We're working with some folks in India who've done housing microfinance. We're working with some in Mexico who've done it. We know how to do it. But the other part is then you have to have a business that will do that and make money at it and mitigate the risks before the loan is made and the risks after. So the reason, in short, that housing finance is hard to come by is that the market hasn't figured out how to make loans on people who are creditworthy if we knew everything there is to know, but aren't creditworthy given what the market knows about them. We try to close that information gap. We try to close that financial product gap. And the other thing that we do is we try to help entities like that find the seed capital they need to make the loans to prove that it is creditworthy and that the real risk of doing this is much less than the market's uninformed perception of that risk. And if you do that, you have something that replicates and you change the world.